Welcome to CivilNet. My guests today are two colleagues, Gevorg Ter-Gabrielyan, who heads the Eurasia Partnership Foundation in Armenia, and Emel Kurma, who heads the Helsinki Citizens Assembly in Istanbul. And we're going to be talking about a new project supported by the European Commission. And the project is called Gevorg.
Support to Armenia-Turkey normalization process.
And we were talking today earlier, and I have to confess that I'm a part of this consortium that is going to be helping normalize this process. We were talking today about what a funny word normalization is. And so we're trying to do something, 8 organizations, in an environment that really isn't normal, is it? What are we going to try to do?
Wow.
Wow.
Just putting aside all of the details, I think that civil societies in both countries have acquired a new role in recent years. And this is something which surpasses any imagination that could be, that their role could have been a few years ago. So the movements are taking place, people are learning, relearning, they are re-evaluating things based, in a way, in opposition to the state structures. Even if the state
certainly not in collaboration with.
Not in collaboration. So essentially, European Commission supports 8 organizations, 4 in Armenia, 4 in Turkey, to go ahead and try to do things, worthwhile things, so that this civil society interaction, the civil society process becomes even bigger and larger.
And we should mention that in Armenia, those 4 organizations are Eurasia Partnership Foundation, Sիվիլիթաս, the Regional Studies Center, and the Public Journalism Club.
Yes.
And in Turkey, those 4 organizations are the Hrant Dink Foundation, the TEPAV, the think tank in Ankara, Anadolu Kultur, and
the Helsinki Citizens Assembly.
Emel, here in Armenia, we often, because Armenia-Turkey is such an important topic for us, we often think that that's really the only thing on our government's agenda and on your government's agenda.
Yeah.
But not quite so, is it?
Not quite so. I can't, of course, judge as for Armenia, but also in Turkey, this becomes an issue which is very much sort of pressed into one very, very touchy or hot potato marginalized line. This is why we want to normalize that. This is why we need to normalize that, so we can tackle our issues, which are multifaceted, millions of issues, but this stands as an essential blockage, I think, if you ask my personal opinion.
And I think that you need to give that a little more context, because that's how we can explain why the Helsinki Citizens Assembly, for example, that is a human rights group, is even engaged in these Armenia-Turkey normalization issues.
It is, because we believe our societies deserve more attention of their citizens as much as their states. We believe there's a responsibility of citizens to actually own issues and lead their governments. So that's why the name Citizens Assembly Helsinki is a different matter.
Is it? In Armenia, it's very much now a kind of open field, isn't it? With the protocols frozen, there are a handful of organizations trying to do some things. What is the hope for our being effective, having impact?
Well, one way you could construe the strategy is when the amount of people in Turkey who are normal people, who understand the values of history, of reconciliation, of reevaluating the past, reaches a certain level, then the society will change drastically. So a major part of efforts of Armenian organizations is directed towards supporting and increasing the amount of those who try to understand their past in Turkey. But of course, another important thing is to think about what we do in Armenia here with that very past, because there are a lot of issues here as well which are not being addressed.
I agree with Gevorg about this a critical mass, building up a critical mass, so we are confident enough to talk about things that we're having difficulties to talk about.
In Armenia, we often, those of us trying to do things, we often have to defend our position, because the first line of cynicism or skepticism usually is, It's such a big country, you're talking to 200 people, what about the rest? I know what our answer is. What should our answer be?
You mentioned the protocols frozen. There's been and there have been and there will be people who were there striving to open this road, this understanding across Turkish society, which is not a homogeneous society like anywhere around the world. There were people striving for that even before any protocols were mentioned. So whether they're frozen or not, we have work to do. In that sense, I think its centrality in Turkey's, I think, public agenda may not be so visible when you look into the media, whatever. Sure. It cross-cuts everything in the subconscious, in the semi-conscious. It binds a lot of Turkey's many other issues. So it's very central, actually, even it's not that visible.
Is it unfair to ask you, do you think that in the run-up to 2015, the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the genocide, is it unfair to ask you whether this is going to be an easier time for you and your colleagues to have impact, or is this going to be a harder time?
I see it as I try to see it as in larger frame. There can be things worsening and more strained towards 2015, but what is it? Wasn't 2000 as horrible, as difficult, as challenging? So what was, I don't know, 1955? But of course it builds up into some symbolic milestone, and thus tension may rise. But then here we are, and as you said, the 200 people who started up maybe 10, 15 years ago are not anymore 200 people. Maybe we don't have 200 militants for the good cause, but we have maybe, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 people who are accustomed to hear about these things, who don't feel terrified when the several issues are put on the table. This is what we mean by the normalization process. It may get tense. It will get less tense. We work for that. I mean, we can't put ourselves we can't situate ourselves only according to the conditions. We worked under the worst conditions anyway.
Gevorg, you've worked in this field, in the NGO world, in the civil society dialogue world now for a decade, more. Is it getting easier or harder on our side?
It's getting, well, there are some things which get easier and some things which get harder. It's easier because there are definitely many more people who have acquired biography. People, organizations, groups, entities who have acquired a biography of trying to address this issue. There are many products available now. When we were starting, most of these products didn't exist.
What is a product?
Like there was almost no knowledge about the Muslim Armenians, Hamsheni Armenians living in Turkey, about the amount of people who have had ancestors as Armenians, people who write themselves as Turks or Kurds. A lot of stuff was not known. Most of the people from Armenia, as well as from the diaspora, hadn't visited any part of Turkey. Now many things have changed because I think many thousands of Armenians have now, until today, in the last 10 years, visited different parts of Turkey, and so on and so forth. So some things have become easier because there is something to rely on. What becomes more difficult is that the process of education propaganda in Armenia, the state propaganda, is actually not supportive at all. It is a counterproductive influence in all these respects. It's also connected with the Karabakh conflict and other reasons, but essentially, in a way, you could interpret it as ease as well, because when you don't rely on anything coming from the state, you feel much freer to act as the sovereign individual citizen of the country, self-determined, yes.
I think that you will agree that one of our critical issues is that the decade-plus efforts being carried out, the 200 people that have now turned into thousands of people, partly because of the Hrant Dink assassination, partly because of civil society efforts and democratization, that the resonance of these efforts and activities still is so small that even concerned people, tabula rasa people, not the ones that have positions to defend that are against this process, but we don't get the word out as much as we wish we did.
We may say that, but also we can be amazed at the number of proliferating publications in Turkey. Not only social studies or historical books or other sort of critical, free works and studies, but also so many novels, so many things being sort of published and circulating. Maybe they're not as visible as on mainstream media screens, but it gets further widespread by the day. So I think we're not seeing yet, but I think there's an expansion of a base to build up upon. I feel pretty much confident about that.
Is that the same in Armenia, or did the protocols kick back that process a bit?
Well,
the freezing of the protocols.
First on the constituency in Turkey, I think that my constituency in Turkey is all those who are in the Gezi Park. So it's not only those who know about Armenia issue, care about it, it's also those who are for change, for democracy, for human rights and all these values.
Or Turkey.
In Turkey, yeah.
In Turkey. In Armenia, what can I say? As I said, after the collapse of the protocol process, the state has put a lot of effort into turning the tide, so to speak. And if by then the majority of the population was in favor of opening the borders with no preconditions, since then, probably, if you make question the sense, what is it called, the research, sociological research, the majority of the population will be against opening the borders, because it is this attitude is supported by the state propaganda, by the media propaganda, by educational system and things like that. The problem is that neither approaches are absolutely correct. That if we are thinking about opening the border, we have to study deeply, which in particular our project will be doing as well, to see what will be the real impact and the real repercussions. But the public opinion here has been very dependent on because it's a small country, on the state turns propaganda systems supported by the media, because media is not also free. So in a way, just like in Turkey, the Gezi Park as compared to the entire Turkey is a very small constituency. In Armenia, we have the public movements, we have the people who are for human rights and so on. So they can understand what does it mean tolerance, what does it mean real modern Turkey, and
what do we want, how do we...
Yeah, they can understand even if they don't, but they are a small minority.
To conclude what became more of a political abstract conversation than maybe we were thinking, can we quickly just list the kinds of projects that this consortium intends to do over the next 18 months of its life? ＳivilNet is committed to providing greater coverage to Turkey-Armenia issues and Turkey issues specifically. What other projects? Helsinki, very quickly.
We're going to organize what we call summer schools, actually one in summer and one in winter for teachers and university students. There's going to be a lot of cultural works with two countries,
exchanges, painters, activists.
There's going to be publications coming out, a lot of workshops with different constituencies.
So it's media, culture, civil society, civic activism, arts, and also there will be an open door grant pool to which anybody can apply if they have a worthwhile idea and if they have a partner from the other side. There will be an opportunity for trips, just the ticket, which we call a mobility fund, managed by the Hrant Dink Foundation.
For people with specific ideas, interests in mind. Yes. And there will also be an internship program for Turkish internship fellowship program for between the two countries in our various organizations.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're going to have to talk about more frequently, but Thank you for coming today.
Thanks for
and
hosting
for allowing us to do this with our audience. We've been talking with Gevorg Ter-Gabrielyan of the Eurasia Partnership Foundation in Armenia and Emel Kurma of the Helsinki Citizens Assembly in Istanbul. And we're talking about the support to Armenia-Turkey normalization process, a program that is being supported by the European Commission. Thank you for following us on CivilNet.